Have you ever worked for a manager who was strictly by the book? You know the type. Someone who lays out the rules, checks the metrics, and expects you to just hit those targets. Now, we constantly hear in modern business culture that strict management is outdated or even inherently bad. But what if I told you it's actually one of the most effective, highly situational tools in a leader's entire arsenal? Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a really close look at the transactional leadership style. Look, for decades, the business world has been absolutely obsessed with transformational leadership, right? The visionaries, the disruptors, the boundary pushers. But today, we're going to pivot away from all that and look at the true workhorse of the corporate world. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our agenda for today. 1, the model defined. 2, 3 core behavioral traits. 3, rewards, KPIs, and accountability. 4, the major pros and cons. And 5, exactly when to deploy this style. All right, starting with section 1, the transactional model defined. Let's understand the baseline concept. So this was first conceptualized by James McGregor Burns back in 1978. Transactional leadership is essentially a management style that relies on an exchange of rewards and punishments to achieve organizational goals. It's basically a classic quid pro quo relationship. It's not about emotional inspiration or, changing the world. It focuses purely on performance management, organization, and supervision. It's simple. You do the task correctly, you get the reward. You fail, you face the consequences. Now, if you're sitting there thinking this sounds like a rare or maybe outdated approach, think again. A 2017 China private enterprise survey actually revealed that a massive 73.3% of private sector leaders exhibited this exact leadership style. I mean, that really proves its incredible global prevalence. It's literally the engine running quietly behind the scenes of countless successful organizations worldwide. Moving right along to section 2, 3 core behavioral traits. Let's look at the anatomy of a transactional leader. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that these traits aren't about being some kind of dictator. It's all about maintaining strict, reliable order. The 3 core characteristics are a real fixation on short-term goals, conventional decision-making, and a strong preference for controlled rules and procedures. Let's break these down logically to see how they actually function together to drive execution rather than disruption. For short-term goals, the focus is purely on tangible results, typically within a 12-month window. When it comes to decision-making, it's not about reimagining the future. Instead, it really zeroes in on the how and what to make sure things just run smoothly. And as for procedures, this kind of leader relies heavily on structured policies and strict consistency to keep absolutely everything on track and completely avoid chaos. Okay, section 3, rewards, KPIs, and accountability. Let's get into the actual mechanics of the model. So the really crucial point here is understanding the contrast between the carrot and the stick. Let's translate these academic terms into plain English so we can see how results are driven. On one side, we've got contingent rewards. This is providing perks, bonuses, or praise for hitting your specific targets. On the flip side is management by exception, which basically means using active controls or even passive punishment to step in and correct mistakes when things start to deviate from the standard. You might assume all this rigid structure would just make people absolutely miserable, right? But research published by Atlantis Press actually reveals something quite counterintuitive. It turns out that clearly communicating structured KPIs and rewards actively boosts employee job satisfaction. And if you're wondering why, it's because it completely removes ambiguity from the workplace. Employees know exactly what's expected of them and exactly what they're going to get in return. No guesswork involved. Here's a brilliant real-world example of how appealing to self-interest guarantees task completion. Take Hewlett-Packard, or HP. To encourage corporate volunteering, they didn't just ask nicely or sort of hope for the best. They set a very clear target. They rewarded employees with a $50 good card for hitting exactly 10 volunteer hours in a quarter. It's specific, it's an immediate reward, and it totally gets the job done. All right, let's look at section 4, major pros and cons. It's time for a reality check for modern workforces. Let's start with the major advantages. This model delivers incredibly quick outcomes and speed, which is absolutely vital in fast-paced environments where decisions just need to be executed immediately. It also creates a really deep sense of fairness and significantly reduces favoritism, simply because the rules and rewards apply equally to everyone based on hard metrics. Plus, there is high clarity in expectations in the chain of command. You always know exactly who is in charge and what you need to be doing. However, let's flip the coin and look at the drawbacks. The major cons are that it absolutely hinders creativity and independent thinking. It also definitely suffers from short-termism by lacking a long-term vision, and it's pretty weak when it comes to creating and maintaining deep emotional relationships with employees. So, a fair question to ask is, if it stifles creativity and can cause emotional exhaustion, why use it at all? That brings us to Section 5. When to deploy this style, a practical guide for modern leaders. Here is how this builds into a highly actionable strategy. Look, you shouldn't use this style all the time, but you absolutely should flip the switch to transactional in a few specific scenarios. Step 1. During a crisis or emergency. Think of volunteer firefighters who literally need strict, unquestioned orders to save lives. Step 2. In austere, high-pressure environments where strict compliance is required and errors just aren't an option. And Step 3. When you're chasing strict short-term targets, like end-of-quarter sales quotas. It's a necessary, highly situational tool rather than a permanent leadership identity. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. We've seen that the best leaders adapt to the situation, smoothly blending styles to guide their teams to success. When the pressure is really on and the stakes are high, are you ready to make the transaction? Take some time to reflect on your own adaptability as a leader and how you can apply these insights to your own teams. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope you leave today feeling empowered to use structure and clarity to your absolute advantage.